Hello and welcome to a special edition of Onboarding Bitcoiners. And I want to introduce everybody to the community's newest Hexican, TheQuantinator.
What's up, everyone?
So we're going to be talking about introductory stuff when it comes to Hex. And in the process, we'll be discussing other cryptos like Bitcoin and how they relate and why Hex has such a strong community and why it's done so well to help the Quantinator understand this. So thanks for being here, and let's do the intro. Awesome. So this is basically a pop-up stream. So if people can tell us if you can hear us okay. We've got the studio set up a little bit differently right now. And shout out to everybody who's here watching in the comments. Pulse Lord was here. How's it going? T-Shares, very good name. Let's see. Buffo on the beat, good afternoon. Round of applause for our new member, Orion, good to see you here. How's it going, Johnny? Good to see you there. Children in the Grave. So thanks everybody for joining us today. The Quantinator and I are just going to be having a conversation to introduce him to Hex. So you and I talked last night on the phone for about an hour and a half about Hex. Do you have any particular questions since I know that you started doing your own research?
Right. It's kind of hard to figure out where I want to start. But it seems like a really cool project, man. Just the idea of bringing CDs to the blockchain space. It's something that you would think somebody would have thought of by now.
Yes.
But the fact that nobody has is really kind of bizarre.
Yeah.
So I guess that's kind of a good question there in of itself is like, why is it that nobody has done this before? Like, is there some kind of barrier to entry or some kind of challenge that Richard was able to overcome,
Yeah, that's a really great question, because the answer I'm going to give you is going to go really to the theme of what I think helps people understand crypto the best, which is what are the incentives and what is the game theory that exists. And in crypto before Hex, the incentives were anybody can make a coin and it's more profitable to scam people or to make a promise coin than it is to launch a completed product. And so what that looks like is all of the, file coin, I don't want to like call out any that maybe are still around, but Sia coin, right there. I'm just thinking of ones that I heard of back in 2017. I mean, there are so many coins that are just a copy of something else. And it's a great idea. I invested in something called Bitcoin Rhodium once upon a time. And the idea there was the first coin to pay a quarterly dividend, right? But then, and I don't know about the Bitcoin Rhodium case particularly, but what ends up happening is the people who are running the project, they end up like walking away with all the money because that's what their incentives are for. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And so when it comes to Richard Hart, he was a retired millionaire before Bitcoin was even invented. And then he mined full 50 Bitcoin blocks with his gaming computer back when it was free to mine Bitcoin. And you didn't need a big data center that burns too much electricity. And then he also bought in between $30 and $1 per Bitcoin. And so as you can imagine, as somebody who doesn't seem like he sold any bottoms because he perfectly predicted the 20K Christmas, and I was following him when he called the bottom of the Bitcoin and Ethereum markets, and that's when Hex was launching in 2019. And then even today, he was able to call to the day the top of Bitcoin. So it's pretty interesting. But he's somebody who doesn't have to run away with the money because he already had billions of dollars of Bitcoin. And by creating Hex, he got probably billions of dollars of Ethereum. And so that, like, he doesn't have to sell Hex in order to make money, right?
Right.
So that's what's different there.
Yeah. Yeah, he seems like a really interesting guy. Just watching a few of his videos since last night, as it's been interesting to see. I mean, he's this big speculator. He's had a track record of guessing things correctly, so there's that going for him. But then it also seems like he's always working on different projects. The way that I understand it is, so you've got Hex, which is in and of itself one thing, obviously, and then it seems like Pulse now is kind of like this separate venture that they're kind of launching into. So it's cool to see, somebody who's not just satisfied with one product that they've successfully delivered to the community, but now they're also starting to branch into other parts, like forking Ethereum to create Pulse, which is cool. So it's like, what's going to come next? Where do we go from here? And here we are almost on the day of the launch of Pulse. So
Yes.
That's really exciting too.
Yeah, it is. And I think Richard has he's outlined his roadmap. He wants to help humans with longevity so that people can reverse aging. He
Right.
thinks that that's a pretty cool idea. And so that's why he raised $25 million with the Pulse launch for medical research with the SENS Foundation in the past 2 weeks. And so there's a lot of exciting stuff. I agree. I think that Pulse, again, going to incentives, like Pulse being in essence an airdrop for everybody who holds coins on Ethereum. Once they get their free money on the Pulse network, their copy of whatever they had on Ethereum, then they might really like Pulse. And if they like Pulse, then they might really like Hex, and that could lead to some more price appreciation.
Right. I guess, so one thing I am curious about is, what are the risks associated with moving your crypto from Ethereum network onto Pulse? Are there any? Is it too soon to know what the true extent of those risks are? Or
So you actually, to get the free copy, you don't have to move anything, but there will be a bridge for people who want to buy in more onto the Pulse side of things, because there probably won't be fiat on-ramps from the start. With Pulse, that's something that will have to be added, by the banking system at some point. But Ethereum already has all those connections. So what I imagine people will still do, although I know Richard is working with different teams to be able to buy directly into Hex with dollars. Right now, people buy Ethereum, or they buy Bitcoin, or they buy something on a centralized exchange, and then they can convert it into Hex. Well, same thing. If you buy any kind of crypto, then you should be able to convert it into Pulse. And then once you have Pulse, then you'll be able to trade that for any of the coins that are on that network.
Gotcha. Okay.
Just like Ethereum, basically.
Right. So you on-ramp through Ethereum, and then once you're in Ethereum, then you can convert.
Yes.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So it's what other questions do you have?
Let's see. It's interesting that, like last night when we were talking on the phone, you said essentially what you're doing when you buy into Pulse is you're sending money to your future self.
When you time lock Hex.
Right.
Yes.
When you stake it. Are there any reasons why somebody wouldn't want to stake it? Why they would just want to hold it instead? Is there any advantage to that?
Yeah, if you think the price is going to go up and you want to sell.
That's pretty much it, right?
Yeah, so what I usually recommend to people is to keep a little bit of Hex liquid, but to also stake a good amount of it. It kind of depends like how much you believe from the start, and really like, I guess what your relationship is with money starting off. Like if you're like, for the last person that we onboarded on the show was Dr. Diva. And to her, she's like at a point in her life where she said, oh, putting $200 into Hex, that seems like that would be the price of, dinner and a movie, or something like some sort of like entertainment value. And so like mentally with her thinking that way, it allowed her to say she doesn't really need to keep liquid Hex. She's more interested in buying and then, sending more to her future self. Because again, with compound interest, that can be a really powerful thing.
Right.
It was actually Einstein who was misquoted, or who actually said that the eighth wonder of the world is compound interest. And people who understand this, they're the ones that get paid, and people who don't, they're the ones that pay the cost of that.
Right.
Time value of money.
Right. Yeah, man, it's an interesting concept. When we talk about crypto, just given the fact that it's so new and it's still yet to be widely adopted, there's obviously a lot of risk involved. And I think that turns a lot of people away from it, especially for more conservative investors. They look at it as almost like a taboo topic. So when we find a project such as Hex that kind of offers its investors risk management, I think that's a really, really valuable thing to have in this space. It's something that a lot of cryptos and a lot of projects are not offering. If you go in, it could go to zero tomorrow. You really don't know what's going to happen. I myself have done decently well for crypto for the amount that I put in. Some would say that's luck. Others would say that I researched well. But at the end of the day, there's a lot of risk in this space. It's not like you're investing in government bonds or something that's more established. So I think it's really cool that we have a project here that essentially what's going to happen when you go to take out what you put in. Like whether you put in the full 15-year commitment and you take it out at the end of the 15 years, or you put in a year or whatever it is, you pretty much know exactly, give or take, what you're going to be looking at in that time frame, at the end of that time frame. So I think that's probably the most important value aspect that I see when it comes to Hex, in my opinion.
That's really interesting because I haven't really thought of it that way, which is why I'm glad we're having this conversation, and why I'm glad to have such a smart guest such as yourself on the show. Because when you're new to Hex and you're looking at it as something that is predictable, I think that most of us who stream, we would be wanting to warn people that that we can't guarantee the value. We don't know the dollar value of Hex in the future. But when you are looking at it from a Hex point of view, you really do have certainty that it's not going to go to zero, because you're going to keep getting paid in Hex whenever you're getting the daily interest accruing. And so that is a really good point, that if if people are valuing their wealth in Hex, then it does accrue value over time when it's time locked. And there aren't other coins that do that to the extent that Hex does. Hex has had $5 or $10 billion of value staked for an average of 5.8 years. So that's never been done before in the history of economics, is that much money being staked in a decentralized way. And when I say staked, I mean like that's the same as time locking. But when you have so many people who are staking so much for so long, that's a really good indication that if more people come along and see that there's such a good use case, that sending money to your future self, that's valuable, then you could get a lot more adoption than you have now. And I would argue that Hex actually has really low adoption right now, that only having 50,000 people in it is really small compared to how big it could be, because I'm willing to bet that there's lots of people in the world who want to save their money and know what it's going to do in such a certain way, as you're saying. So,
Right. The other thing that I think is really cool about Hex is the fact that it doesn't have a governing body. It's pretty much fully self-regulated. I've seen similar projects that allow you to stake in a similar way, but they do it in such a way that stakers are able to vote on behalf of the future of the protocol. And seeing that Hex doesn't do that is kind of an interesting spin-off, because it's like so the problem with staking in a way that gives stakers the ability to vote on behalf of the future of the protocol means that whoever stakes the most is essentially controlling that network. And so I think that's a really big con that a lot of people overlook. Everything about this space is to try and be decentralized, right? That's the whole point of crypto in the first place.
correct.
So we don't want to create a network where a select few are able to control the entire network, because that's counterintuitive. It's like it's taking us back to square one. So the fact that Hex doesn't include that is, I think, a really interesting component of this specific blockchain.
And this is TheQuantinator for people who are interested in following him on Twitter, twitter.com/TheQuantinator. And I mean, you get it. And normally it takes people a lot of hours to get it. But I think the broadcasters such as myself are getting better at explaining it after months and months and months of practice and doing nothing but that. But then also smart people like you are coming along and having an open mind and really nailing it on the head that Hex, as Wales Only says and many others say, Hex is the only true crypto because it's a finished product and it doesn't have admin keys. It's done. Bitcoin isn't done. Ethereum isn't done. But Hex is. Yay.
Yeah, that's really neat. And I was actually watching a video earlier, and they were talking about the fact that it's already done. And they were talking about the fact that Ethereum is now looking at Hex, and they're starting to take ideas from Hex, which is interesting because originally Hex, like as we see with Pulse, for example, it's a fork from the Ethereum network. So it's like they took the idea from Ethereum and did it so well that now Ethereum is like, hey, wait, that's actually really cool. We should have thought of that. So it's interesting to see that kind of develop. And
yes.
Obviously we're in the very early stages of that, so we'll have to see, how that kind of develops further as we go further into the future. But for me, at least, seeing that the development team on the Ethereum side is looking at the development team on the Hex side and they're taking notice, that to me says that there's a lot of merit to what we're trying to accomplish at Hex. The fact that the original creators are now looking at Hex and saying, wow, that's kind of like validation right there.
Are they looking at it?
You just told me about this last night.
Yeah.
Maddie and I just got on the phone last night. Before last night, I did not know very much about Hex. So I'm what people would consider a novice. But I did a bit of research since we spoke. And yeah, man, in one of the videos that I saw, actually with Richard himself, they were talking about that. So it's kind of cool. It's cool to see that. You don't typically see that in this space. It's like everybody's kind of got their own targets of what they want to accomplish. And yeah, they might copycat and they might try and, beat each other to the punch. But when they start kind of working in tandem, that's when you know that there's really something hot there, So
Yes.
It's kind of exciting to see that.
Yeah, for sure. It's also interesting because when we drill really deep down into the technical aspects of Pulse, it's going to be in Ethereum's best interest to play nicely, because what many people haven't really understood, I think, until Richard came along and recently, just in the past week or two, started to reveal part of his master plan, has to do with liquidity pairs. And on automated market makers such as Uniswap, when liquidity exists, there are certain things that can happen, particularly when it comes to Pulse and Ethereum. Because Pulse is creating a copy of every coin on Ethereum and found probably an economically valid way to make sure that those coins have value, that creates the perfect incentives for anyone who holds liquidity, any of the liquidity providers on the Ethereum side of things, to want to create liquidity pairs with what's on the Pulse side of the chain. And so by doing that, they are going to basically want to arbitrage each other, but the Pulse network will be moving much faster. And it's my understanding that that could give it the kind of advantage that would literally suck tons of the value out of Ethereum, simply because it's a leap forward in the game theory and the understanding of how automated market makers work. So that's the decentralized exchange part of things. We're going to see if what I think he's describing, if that happens or not. But for me, it was enough for me to really want to be involved and to understand more, because I believe that there's, just like we've seen with Hex, that there are going to be really advanced things in the Pulse network that will come to fruition very, very quickly, and that people will have to play nice.
Yeah, it's exciting. It's exciting to see where we go from here. And last night when you and I were speaking on the phone, you told me that you got in really early, and that was a few years ago. And I asked you, I was like, so are you still bullish? Where do we go from here? Is it still early? And you said yes. So I guess I'm curious to see, I mean, you kind of told me why, but maybe it might be beneficial for the listeners to know what's the foundation of your hypothesis for that. Why is it that you think that we're going to continue to grow, and why is this not the peak?
Yeah. So locally, right, like having a short-term mindset, I never know what the price is going to do. And that's why we have our show on Tuesday nights, where I bring together, the quantitative analysis team who's been following Hex and Bitcoin for many years. And, we do the chart analysis and that type of thing. But for me, from a fundamental and psychological perspective, I think that in the medium and long term, Hex will continue to do very well because it's designed better than Bitcoin, which went up 6 million X. So that's 600 million %. And Bitcoin wasn't designed as well. It didn't. So in Bitcoin, in order to secure the network, you have miners burning electricity, and then they have to sell the Bitcoin that they get in order to pay their electric bill. And so that is constantly dumping the price. There's no incentive in Bitcoin for people to delay gratification. And so you get people who wish that they didn't sell. There's a famous tweet from a guy who said, "I'm really glad that I sold my Bitcoin, at 20 cents because now it dipped back down to like 5 cents." And he sold his $2,000 worth or whatever. Yeah. I mean, this real guy, and people really harass him on Twitter and stuff still to this day. But poor that's guy. Yeah. I mean, he made $2,000 or something really stupid, and so it's really interesting to see, not only for the people who would have sold too early, but also for the people who come along and they think that they want to trade Hex because they see it's got such a nice price chart, and then what ends up happening is their behavior ends up getting changed. And so me being somebody who's seen the community grow and heard so many testimonials of people saying that they used to trade and then they found Hex and now they don't trade anymore, it's really exciting to me because I also think the behaviors that Hex is incentivizing are behaviors that are good for people's mental health.
Yeah.
So I like that.
Yeah, and mental health is a big aspect of this, right? That's kind of something that we haven't touched on yet. Transferring people's tokens from Ethereum network onto Pulse, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, but Richard has created an incentive where if you donate to mental health charities, I think you mentioned one last night.
So it's one charity in particular, which is the Longevity Research Foundation, sens.org.
Right.
And it's interesting because I'm the one who brought mental health, that perspective to the Hex community. And one of the first things that I did after I created a series called Hex Cameo, where I hired celebrities to shout out to Richard to thank him for creating Hex, because Hex had already made me some good money and I got free money from the Uniswap airdrop. So I wanted to give back a little bit. So I created, even before I showed my face in crypto, I created Hex Cameo videos. And then my second thing was I wrote a story. I wrote basically an article about how somebody was suicidal and then got into Hex and then now has a plan to live for as long as they can because they sent money to their future self and now they want to be around the community and to continue to grow and improve their mental health while they wait for their future stakes to come out. And so that was really cool. And then of course a lot of people since then have said that Hex was good for their mental health. And so the founder, Richard Hart, describes it as an emergent property that he did not predict that Hex would be so good for people's mental health. But I think it makes sense to a lot of people now that they've seen it, because really having a fortune, right, that's locked 5 years, 10 years, 15 years in the future, that makes you think more closely about your health behaviors now, so that you're not going to be falling apart by the time you get that money out.
Right. Yeah. When it comes to investing in general, there's a lot of stress involved, right? It's
yes. Oh, good point.
It's when you first buy in, you have that instant. It's that instant self-doubt. No matter how confident you are, you can't know 100% if you made the right decision or not.
Correct.
And so immediately, as soon as you enter your position, you're already hit with this stress that, you could be the best at ignoring that feeling, but it's still there.
Yeah.
And so, especially in such a risky space like crypto, the fact that you're able to just kind of step away from it, that's a really cool thing. I think that, just staking in general to me is kind of a newer concept. I stumbled upon it maybe a few months ago with a different coin, but it sounds like Hex has really kind of ushered in the benefits of staking and just how impactful it can be, not only for people's portfolio, but like you said, for their mental health. It's a really important part of investing that a lot of investors overlook. You get so wrapped up in the money that you start to lose track of how you're handling it yourself. And last night we spoke about another part about investing mental health, and that was sudden wealth syndrome.
Yeah.
And I know that you sound really passionate about that. So is there anything you want to mention about that?
Yeah, well, people who watch the show, they are familiar with the series that I've been doing on sudden wealth syndrome, which I had been unaware of because I specialized in providing mental health and substance abuse treatment to individuals who are on Medicaid who earned less than $15,000 a year for their whole family. And so it was, it's really interesting to me now to be working with a community that is full of so many millionaires who have become millionaires in the past 2 years with Hex, and to see what their mental health journey is and challenges, and how we can all be supporting each other. And sure enough, I've learned more about Sunwell syndrome, about how it applies to a lot of people in crypto who start to feel isolated, anxious, depressed, because they were used to living their lives like with the daily grind and with, maybe living paycheck to paycheck or worrying about their near-term and long-term finances. And then all of a sudden, people are having this large amount of money that they've made through crypto, and now they have to deal with guilt and shame and like how to be motivated now that your relationship with money has changed and your incentives have changed maybe. And then how do you cope with the social aspect of things? It's how do you relate to people who aren't there yet? And are you going to be impatient with people? Are you going to feel guilty and give away all your money? Are you going to lose your sense of self, right? Are you going to test drive a Tesla and then realize that it's not even that great and then like question your future? Yeah. There are all these things that I guess it's weird because school, right, and society, like, they don't prepare people in any aspect of money, right? Like, to the extent that people need it, right? The amount of financial literacy and education that people have is really low, in my opinion. And then on top of that, though, in the Hex community, people are kind of starting to pay attention to prepare themselves, even if they haven't made a fortune yet, because it's one of the things that can help people really, no matter what stage you are in investing, learning how to be yourself, be grounded, self-esteem, self-care, using omega-3 or fish oil to support your prefrontal cortex, which is the part of your brain that is involved in decision making, planning for the future, thinking about consequences, inhibiting your impulsive side, all the human things that animals can't do are pretty much held in the prefrontal cortex. And so being able to take it's really kind of like a main ingredient that's supposed to be in food that people don't get enough of. There's about 15% of the adults in the United States that take enough omega-3, and then everybody else is, is suffering from leaky prefrontal cortex syndrome. And that's where the electricity is just leaking out of the front of your brain because you don't have enough electrical insulation there from the omega-3. So I used to get almost all my clients to take omega-3 and then just see their lives change drastically. And that happened to me too. Like, even though I thought my life was going pretty well, I started taking omega-3, and then all of a sudden life got way easier. So something I would definitely recommend to people if they're looking for a way to improve their mental health or to improve their investing, because a lot of the skills that you use when you invest, like emotional regulation, like doing your own research, like being patient, those are all things that require a healthy prefrontal cortex. And it doesn't matter how well you treat your body. Well, to some extent it does, but there's lots of other things you can do to improve your prefrontal cortex once you make sure that you're not leaking electricity out of there. But that's like the first thing I would worry about is because then all the other things will be easier: exercise, sleeping more, drinking less alcohol, doing healthy activities more. So it's kind of a long spiel about mental health.
But it's important, man. It's really important. I mean, you're not the first streamer or the first YouTuber I've seen who talks about the importance of mental health as it relates to cryptocurrencies or investing as a whole.
Really?
Yeah, you're not. I've actually seen a few people, and to me that tells me that people want to hear this kind of information.
Yeah.
Because it's extremely important. I mean, we're kind of accustomed as humans to experiencing a really severe kind of spectrum of emotions when it comes to winning and losing. It's like, you know, if you win or lose, that should not have to impact the quality of your mental health. You know, it's a hard thing to learn how to lose. It's not such a hard thing to learn how to win, but that's not to say that there aren't side effects of winning as well. You know, so there's a lot that goes into it, and you know, when we think about investing, we need to be cognitive of the fact that it does take a toll on us, whether, you know, we're aware of it or not. It takes a really big toll on us. And I saw in the comments somebody said it's really exciting to see those green candlesticks. And you're right, you know, it's one of the best feelings in the world, but as soon as you start seeing those red candlesticks, assuming you're not shorting it, you know, it's kind of a flip-flop of emotions. So when we find something that you're able to stake and you're able to go in with confidence, knowing that there's a certain degree of risk management involved with your decision making, you know, that's so important, and I can't emphasize that enough.
Yes. Yeah, and I'm really glad that you have that perspective and understand that. And I think you're right. I think it is important to everyone, and that's part of my mission, really, to program mental health into money, because I think everybody needs mental health just like everybody needs money. And the two don't always mix well together, especially when the government is essentially creating inflation by printing more dollars, and then using those dollars however they do really makes the price of things go up, and then people can't buy as much with their savings, and so people aren't incentivized to save like they could, and then they have more uncertainty about their future and more dependence on the government and the legacy financial system. And so that's why it's so important to have people not investing more than they can afford to lose. But when it comes to Hex, it is helpful to be able to set it and forget it. Although that's not what happens. People still check the price charts a lot, even if they have all their money time locked. But that's okay. I mean, it's still healthier to be able to see how it goes. And for me, one exercise that I did, I got really lucky. And when I was first discovering Hex, I was practicing how to regulate my emotions by buying bottoms and selling tops. And I did that for about like a month or two before I said, okay, all right, like I quit like Hex, because Hex sometimes jumps up so fast, like you would lose if you didn't hold it. And so trading even with Hex is something that I don't recommend anymore. And it's something that, but having that experience of like forcing myself to buy on a dip, even when I just say, okay, I'm only going to buy on a down day, and then having to wait for that down day to come, it's a good exercise. Now, this isn't financial advice. This isn't medical or therapy advice. So, you know, I can't predict the future, but it's really interesting to see how people's emotions kind of interface with their finances. And the last point I would make about that is just that the reason why people care about money is because it represents their time and their energy, right? And so when most people in the world, like 99% of people, right, like need to work in order to afford all the things that they need for their family and for themselves, right? And that's so when the price of things goes up, and when saving isn't the best deal compared to thinking more short term and like spending all your money instead of saving it, and like going into debt and stuff like that, that can be hard on people because it's their time that's being messed with. Like it's their time with their family, with their kids, with themselves, with their own health. People make a lot of sacrifices for money, and so that's why it's so weird that like in the technology age, we would predict the prices of things would go down. So if the government wasn't printing so much money, we would see that there would be more for everybody. And that's kind of one of the biggest things that I think is hopeful about the future of the world, is that like technology will continue to be an exponential force to create abundance. And once governments stop like siphoning all of that off, then there will be enough for everybody, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, it's one of the videos I saw on your channel was the video about becoming happy with servitude. And do you remember that one? Do you know what I'm talking about? It was
No.
on your beginner kind of list of videos. But I thought that was really interesting too, because it's like,
Oh, that's one that, okay, that's one that I didn't make, but it's one of
Okay.
the few that I have on my playlist. Yeah, that was a really cool video.
yeah, because that by itself is a really, you know, kind of relevant point, I think, to me, is that, you know, to me at least, money represents freedom.
Yes.
And when it comes to crypto, the money is actually, for me, as much as sometimes I wonder if I actually truly believe this, but you know, the money is kind of a side effect. To me, I really find this stuff really cool. I'd be doing this if there was no money involved at all, because it's the technology behind it to me is really exciting. And I like to kind of watch, you know, the development of smart contracts and, you know, the emergence of central bank digital currencies and et cetera. It's a really cool topic, but the fact that there is money involved in it, it's a really, I mean, obviously if you make money on it, that's great. It's a side effect, I think. Some people I realize don't have that same kind of outlook on it. You know, they're kind of in this space for simply just to try and make money. And there's nothing wrong with that. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that at all. But, you know, it's also kind of cool to just step back from the money aspect of it and look at it for what it can possibly do for humanity. You know, blockchain technology is really going to revolutionize the way that we store and transmit data. And, you know, it's like, I've heard somebody refer to it as an industrial revolution, and there's only been a few industrial revolutions in the history of time, like
Correct.
the invention of computers, the invention of the printing press, you know, the invention of cell phones, you know, taking away the landline and giving people the ability to communicate mobilely. So I guess when I heard them use that term, industrial revolution, I kind of got interested in what they meant by that, and I went down the rabbit hole a little bit. And I think essentially what they're saying is an industrial revolution is when something is invented that influences or impacts every single aspect of life. Like computers, for example, there's pretty much nothing nowadays that isn't in one way or another impacted by computers. Pretty much everything we do is computers. So if that person is correct, the person that I heard say that is correct, and blockchain technology truly is an industrial revolution, then that means that there is exponentially, there's so much possibility for beneficial side effects, not just for investors, but for everyone. You know, one industry that comes to mind in particular is like the healthcare industry, and how prone they are to hackers. I don't know about you, but I don't want people knowing, you know, what I go to see the doctor for. And that happens all the time. A lot of people don't realize how common it is for health records to get leaked. And so now that we have blockchain technology, it kind of allows that to be stored in a more secure way that, you know, we don't have to, hospitals and the healthcare industry as a whole doesn't have to shell out so much money to try and maintain their security, because now they have something that they can rely on that is a lot more secure. And so if they're able to spend less money, and I believe it's a lot, I don't have a figure, but I'm pretty sure it's in the billions that the national healthcare industry spends on security every year. If they're not on the hook to spend that to secure their clients' information, then that means hopefully that we could possibly see more affordable healthcare for all. And so this is just kind of like a trickle-down side effect of blockchain technology as a whole. And I think a lot of people get caught up in the short-term aspects of blockchain. You know, they get caught up in the little nitty-gritty things, and it's important to try and step back and see the bigger picture. It's something that is going to, I truly believe, is going to impact everybody's life. from first world countries like the United States to third world countries like, you know, third world countries. So it's important to kind of recognize that and look at it from cast a bigger net and remind yourself that this isn't just an investment opportunity. This is something that is really, really, really cool. And, you know, everybody's going to be impacted by it in one way or another. And it's not that far out. I mean, it is early, but, you know, crypto is probably one of the fastest advancing technologies that we've seen in a long time. Even when computers came along, I mean, how long did it take for us to go from the original Macintosh to the MacBook? You know, it took a long time. And I realize blockchain has been around for a long time. I think since like the 70s or 80s actually was like when the original kind of cryptography came out. So there is that, but you know, I kind of think of it as Bitcoin was like the introduction. Whoever Satoshi Nakamoto is, he, she, they, whatever they are, I think that they were trying to use Bitcoin as a door opener to show people the potential that this kind of technology has. And you and I were talking about that last night with Bitcoin. I compared it to the Nokia or the BlackBerry of cell phones. It's like, I could be wrong, okay? And I want to put that up front. Bitcoin might be the future, but in my opinion, I think it's much more likely that Bitcoin is the prototype. And where we go after Bitcoin is really truly the future of blockchain technology. And so seeing things like Hex, where you can stake, and other kinds of ways of benefiting from investing, like yield farming, which is another thing we mentioned. You know, it's cool to see all the different opportunities coming to existence and being more widely adopted. So you know, there's a big picture to be seen here, and I think a lot of people miss that.
Yeah, look at the comment that David Morales just put up.
I used to love my BlackBerry.
You were talking about that last night with BlackBerry being, you know, a good comparison to Bitcoin, and yeah, I love your point there. I mean, I'm very impressed by your analysis of crypto. I agree that Bitcoin, you know, was basically a prototype, and whether, you know, Satoshi knew that that's how it was going to be or not. I mean, you know, Satoshi was smart enough to solve the Byzantine generals' problem of computing, which was holding back a decentralized currency from being viable. And so, you know, Satoshi at least believed that it was possible to have a decentralized peer-to-peer form of currency. And, you know, Bitcoin ended up being a temporary store of value. But there aren't people who own $10 billion worth of Bitcoin that have time locked it for 5.8 years,
right.
To my knowledge. And, you know, so that kind of goes to show that Hex is using what Bitcoin figured out, which was certain aspects of game theory to prevent double spends from happening. And now it's taking it to the next level with incentivizing humans to have something through which they can save their money and not have to worry about governments changing the rules and printing more. And that's where the smart contract comes in. And so also to your point of like being in it for the tech, that's kind of like an inside joke with like douchey Bitcoin people who are like making fun of the smart people that made them rich. And they're like, you know, they're sarcastically saying, I'm in it for the tech, whenever they're obviously just in it for the money. But I don't even like, personally, I don't get offended anymore, but I don't even get the joke because it's, because there are people who are in it for the tech, who see the bigger picture, such as yourself and myself, you know, wanting to see a world where there's abundant healthcare and people can afford the best for themselves, to see a world where when there's a technological leap forward, it's not just going to people who are already billionaires, but it's going to everybody. And, you know, to be able to see mental health go viral, right, in the ways that we know it can, through, through the internet. Why isn't mental health more prevalent? Is probably because, people being stressed out and day trading markets, like that's very profitable for the existing banking system and the politicians that they buy. So, but you better watch out when Hexicans come along and steal your lunch, right? And then, then by our own government officials, what are you going to do then?
Right.
Cry to your mommy?
Right. Yeah, I actually have had this very similar conversation with buddies before where it's like, okay, so now we have this decentralized form of currency, and it's all of our hopes that now, the billionaires won't have as much power and governments and politicians won't have as much power over controlling our lives through the instrument of finance. And, you also have to kind of consider the flip side, though, and think of yourself as, what if I was a billionaire? How am I going to make sure that I maintain my wealth? Because if you look at all the billionaires in the world, there's not a lot of them. And if I was a billionaire, I want to make sure that I stay a billionaire, right? And, it's important. I guess what I'm trying to say is that it's not foolproof. And it's important to be aware of that because, even though that we have kind of made a breakthrough, who's to say that the government couldn't just come out tomorrow and say, hey, we're banning cryptocurrencies. If you're caught with crypto in your wallet and you don't give it up, you're going to be fined. I mean, that's a total extreme. But what if that happened? What then? We could go back to square one like really, really easily and really quickly. So it's important to kind of think of it through an institutionalized lens and consider it from the perspective of the already rich who want to make sure that they position themselves in a way that they're able to adapt to the fact that there's going to be an extreme wealth distribution over the next few years. And so, how do you position yourself as a billionaire to make sure that you maintain your pedestal above everyone else? And that's like a really crappy thing to think about from our perspective because we're not billionaires.
Well,
but
I have an answer to that.
Yeah.
It may or may not be true, but like the way that people like us who care about making the world a better place can win against billionaires who want to stay all powerful is for us to beat them in competition. The thing about being a billionaire is, in order to stay on the cutting edge of innovation, you have to be able to find people who are the smartest in their field and then pay them. And that the problem of human resources, it's not always easy to find the best person in the world. And not everybody is motivated by money, in fact. It's kind of interesting. And so like the altruism that I am practicing when it comes to the company and the app that I founded, tshare.app, we provide a way for people to get into Hex and we don't take a fee. And we actually spend some of our own money to like maintain our servers, and then all the work that I do and all of the work that the genius programmer who I work with does, that's all free. And it would probably cost hundreds of thousands of dollars if he was charging and if I was charging. But we're happy to do it for free for the community because we believe in this future of abundance. When people are having an abundance mindset and perspective, then they aren't just worrying where it's a zero-sum game. So like even trading, like trading futures and leverage trades and all that good kind of stuff, like when you win, somebody else loses on the other side of that trade. And it's the middleman who runs the exchange that gets rich in the end off of all the fees. But like in the future, I hope to see a world where there's abundant altruism and where people are, saying, oh, Hex bought me my financial freedom. I have time to do the things I want to do with my life now. And like one thing I want to do is pay it forward. And so like this is me. That's what I'm saying. And I'm saying thank you, Richard Hart, for putting me in this kind of position, and by inventing Hex. And then what are the types of things that I can create that will add value to the world and that will help other people.
Right. Yeah, I think that's probably the most important thing that we can do with our lives is help people have better lives.
Yes.
Is what are you going to leave behind for humanity when you're gone? I think that's, at least for me. I realize other people have different opinions, and that's totally fine. But I want my personal legacy to be something that all of humanity can benefit from, and who knows if I'm going to be able to accomplish that goal or not. But it's really cool that crypto has kind of given us a platform where people like you and me who want to create a better world are able to have more leverage in order to pursue that. Money is important. Money allows you to do things that you're not able to do without it. And so that goes both ways. If you have bad intentions, then you now have the means to carry out your bad intentions. If you have good intentions, you now have the means to carry out your good intentions. So I would like to think that there's more good people in the world than there are bad. And the fact that we have this crypto platform now where people are able to kind of make smart decisions that change their lives for the better, hopefully will kind of create this emergence of people who are able to carry out that change. So I think that, to me personally, that is probably the most important aspect of this whole space, is giving people the means to pursue things that they otherwise would not have been able to pursue. And hopefully whatever it is that they pursue is something that will benefit us all.
I agree. Well put. And now, speaking of thinking about the future and Hex, if you want, you can grab your phone here, and I can send you a little bit of Hex so you can see how it works.
Yeah, man, let's do it.
Cool.
Sounds fun.
So if you go on your phone, do you have MetaMask on there yet?
I don't have it yet, but I'm familiar with it.
So go see if you can access it by going to tshare.app in your Safari browser.
Okay.
Because it's a web-based app, and it's not necessarily in the App Store, which is a good thing. Yay! All of your personal information is going to be kept private.
Right here?
Yep.
Cool.
tshare.app is the website, and then it'll pop up with the button there that you click. And
Should I go ahead?
it'll, yep, there's a button there. And then it'll take you to download MetaMask, the right one. And so go ahead and download that.
Oh.
Perfect.
There we go.
And then for the next, so you're going to hit open, and then it's going to say get started, and then create a new wallet, and then you're going to go ahead and make a password, and I'm going to get a piece of paper so you can write down your seed words. All right, great. So we've got our special guest here, TheQuantinator, who is being onboarded into Hex as we speak. And I'm going to go ahead and drop his link here again so that people can follow him on Twitter, because he's our newest Hexican. And so we'll put that in the show notes afterwards as well, because he just came up with his brand name that I love, obviously, because, well, he said that his focus in crypto is quantitative analysis. And of course, everybody here knows that I do a Quant gang stream on Tuesday nights. And so let's see, people in the chat here. So good to see you, Balia Brand. Great stream. Thank you. Howdy from Montana, from HexDex, HexDeck16. Crypto Learner says, I see that crypto wealthy people are young. That's super good to win this, to win over certain types of people. It brings us faster, further. We need solutions to the world's problems now, not in 30 years. Exactly. So people are saying welcome aboard. And
Thank you.
Now you set up a password.
Yep.
And I'm wondering, maybe somebody else's show just ended because we got a bunch of people joining us now. And so great to see everybody. Go ahead and hit the like and subscribe button. And we really appreciate it here. The Quantinator is going to be writing down his seed words and keeping them in a safe place and never sharing them with anybody, because that's how you lose your crypto. I know that there are a lot of bots right now on Twitter where if you ask for help, they automatically post a link to a Google Docs spreadsheet that is designed to steal all your money. And already somebody asked for help about tshare.app, which we don't expect work from others. And so that was interesting that those bots got in there and started shilling their scammy ways. And also, I mean, even Richard pointed it out in one of his recent tweets. And so we want to help protect people as much as possible. If Richard suggested, if anybody wants to create a white hat bot, then they can go around and automatically tag the people who are spamming scams, and that would be really helpful. Another thing that I wanted to say to people while we've got the audience here is that we are continuing to make excellent progress in putting together the second Hex conference, which will be the best of all worlds, where we've had a meetup now in Las Vegas, the first mass Hex meetup, where I drove a tank over a car that we smashed, and so did some other Hexicans. And then we've got, we had the first online Hex conference where all the streamers in the community put on a 4-day long streaming event. And now I'm happy to announce that we are doing pulsehex.com conference, which will be January 6th through 9th online, and then in person March 6th through 9th. So that's 369. And we are selling tickets. So people who buy tickets for fundraising, which is an online event, then will be airdropped tickets to the physical event. And there will be only 1,369 tickets sold. And by judging the amount of people who have been watching this channel, it's we expect that they'll sell out. And so that's why we want people to go ahead and check out pulsehex.eventbrite.com in order to be able to get your ticket now. And then the other domain for the schedule is going to be pulsehex.com. And let's see here. Okay, so you set up your account. Go ahead and hit copy on the 0x button there below account 1. And then text me that public address. And I'm going to be doing some streams upcoming next weekend with T-Money from FreedomTV.info. And he's going to help us unveil all of the plans that we have for the second Hex conference. And so I'm really excited to be working with him again and his team that did such a good job with the Hexican meetup. Now, what I'm doing is I'm going to send our newest Hexican here a little bit of ETH and a little bit of Hex. So what are some of the things that you've learned about Hex so far that are worth reviewing here?
Well, I think it's kind of interesting to me that, like, you were telling me last night how old Hex is, and like, it wasn't until recently that staking kind of became, and yield farming kind of became recognized as being a really a good way to harness investing in this space. So I thought that was kind of interesting, because if Hex has been around for that long, but yet staking just kind of became this new thing that everyone's talking about, you know, it's kind of like, why did that take so long for everyone to catch on to? But I think that's kind of just in and of itself kind of interesting to me.
Yeah, the whole yield farming thing started basically with copycats from Hex around the same time that the DeFi market came out, decentralized finance with decentralized exchanges like Uniswap and 1inch.
Right.
Okay, so as you know, so you've dealt with coins on Ethereum, mostly on centralized exchanges, is that right?
I've done a little bit of both, but yeah, you're correct. Typically, okay. I go through centralized exchanges.
And that's good whenever the fees are so high, but once Pulse launches, then we'll have an alternative there that might allow people to use crypto the way it was meant to be, right, without involving middlemen. And let's see here.
Yeah, it kind of sucks, right? Because we have, you know, originally, like with Bitcoin, for example, everyone thought that it was going to be this new crypto, or this new currency, but it's like, I saw a tweet once that was really funny, and somebody was like, oh, Bitcoin's going to replace the dollar, or Ethereum's going to replace the dollar, and somebody commented on that, and they're like, okay, yeah, let's pretend that that's true one day, and I go to buy a coffee from Starbucks, I'm going to pay $14 in gas fees for a $2 coffee and wait 45 minutes for it to go through.
Yes.
And it's like, that's never going to work, you know what I mean?
Correct.
People need to be more realistic about that fact, is that, you know, this is a new technology. It's still in its early phases, and there's still a lot of drawbacks and a lot of flaws of it. So replacing the dollar, I mean, I could take out $1 out of my pocket right now and give it to you, and boom, transaction's finished. That's way, you know, using crypto as a currency to replace that is not, it's not real. I mean, it's not realistic. So it's kind of funny that, you know, here we have an objective that crypto has tried to accomplish, but yet at the same time, it's like, it's so far away from being in a position where it's able to kind of replace the dollar. I think a lot of people think that we're closer to replacing the dollar with a crypto than they realize we aren't. So it's like, we've got a long way to go. But that's also exciting, because that means that now is the time to get in, you know, before we do maybe reach a point where it does replace the dollar. And I'm not saying that's going to happen. I think that that would be a very difficult transition process, just given the fact that the dollar has, you know, it's institutionalized. It's, you know, you can't just substitute one for the other like that and make a change like that. It doesn't work like that.
Yeah.
But it, you know, it's kind of cool. And it's also confusing for a lot of people too. Because, you know, like, a lot of people don't realize that in order to send an Ethereum transaction, that there's gas involved. A lot of people don't even know what gas is.
Correct.
So it's like, you know, people have to be aware of the drawbacks as much as they are aware of the benefits. You know, they're equally important. Both sides of the spectrum need to be taken into account. So just kind of something I wanted to touch on.
Cool. Yeah, good points. And now, speaking of transactions going through, I've completed my send to you of some ETH and Hex, and now if you're willing to help with the demonstration, if you can go to tshare.app again in your browser, and it'll do something different this time when you hit the button.
Oh, okay. All right, open tshare.
Yep. Go ahead. And then what it's doing is it's opening the website that we created that you can hit connect, and it's opening it within MetaMask. And now it's popping up to show you something that we call the crane game. And so it might take you a couple of times to practice before you you win the game. But if you tap on the hex button there,
Right here?
yep, then it'll start the timer, and you have 15 seconds to move up and to the right, which is the way hex goes on the price chart. And then you can pick up one of those hearts, which is going to reveal a prize. And I'm just logging in here for people to see at home what's going on.
I think I failed.
So tap the game over part,
All right.
and then you can watch me play it here. Everybody can watch me. So I'm going to share my screen here. Share. And then share that. Okay, so this is what people are seeing. And so I tap here. And so you can see what I'm doing here. So I'm going up, I'm hitting the up button, and then I'm hitting over, and I can hold it down, right?
Oh, I didn't
And I
realize
can
that.
use my keyboard here, and I get it right over there, and then I hit the drop claw button. And so then it's gonna pick up that stuffed heart.
Oh, I forgot the drop claw.
Yep.
Gotcha. All right, let's try it again.
And so we made the game a little bit difficult so that it would be more rewarding once you finish it successfully. But there's no back button, so you have to kind of take that into consideration. Perfect.
And then you click this.
Yep. And so it's
Nice.
picked you up, and you can now hit keep prize, and then it automatically detects that you won a fluffy heart, that you already have hex in your wallet, that you already have enough gas fee. And so when you hit mint prize, I'm going to do it here with you, and then I hit confirm. People can't see it at home, but I just hit confirm in MetaMask. Now go ahead and hit that, and now you just submitted the transaction to send money to your future self.
Awesome.
Very, very smooth. Whoa, it got confirmed already. Congratulations, you're a Hexican. And now if you tap go to tshare.app or go.tshare.app, this is the website that we've created that you can connect to that allows you to see the stakes that you've created. So if you hit connect there at the top, it's gonna confirm in MetaMask, and then it's going to pull up the stake that you just created once it reads the blockchain. And it can show you here that you have this active stake that was just created, and it's pending. And you can see like when it expires is in 15 years, and you staked 500 hex, which is what I gifted you, which is about $62. And so you're pretty much all set.
Awesome, man. Thank you.
You're welcome. And if you wanted to make more stakes, then you'd be able to use the tools here to stake for any amount of days and any amount of hex, even though for tshare.app, it limits people to only choosing 5, 10, or 15 years. And that's what the 3 different hearts are. And so, as you can see, it got you all set up there. So
So
cool.
now I want to go ahead and click stake now. Is that it?
You already
staked.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
Gotcha.
there was 100 hex left in your wallet, so you can see how that plays out. Or you can stake it for any duration, but for now you're all set up, and we've successfully onboarded another Hexican. And so welcome to the club, and we've got people applauding, and people are confused by the crane game. That's because it's so easy. It's not a faucet. You basically, if I didn't gift him the hex and send it to him, then he would have had to put in his debit card information. There's actually a way now through MetaMask that we've got enabled that allows people to use their debit card through Apple Pay in some cases in some countries, and that makes it easier than we've ever seen before. Normally people in MetaMask type in their debit card, then they have to log into their bank and get the confirmation code because crypto wants to be really secure when they're dealing with fiat. And so yeah, congratulations to the Hexinator. No, the Quantinator for becoming a Hexican. And I'm going to drop your link one more time here in the chat. So everybody go ahead and follow him as our newest Hexican onboard. And shout out to everybody who's watching here in the live stream and everybody who's watching on the replay. I really appreciate you tuning in to this episode. And I'm hoping that you'll be able to stream again with us in the future.
I'd love to.
Awesome. Well, I'm going to play the outro here. And we'll see everybody on Tuesday night. Actually, I might do another stream later tonight. We'll see. There's lots of people to onboard and lots of stories to tell. So you might see me later on here, but I'm always here on Tuesday nights for Quant Gang and Thursday nights for Hex Therapy Live. So until then, take care, everyone. Remember to stake wisely and sacrifice wisely, my friends.